Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Get the pronunciation, Landon.
Where we are devoted to creating conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. It's Friday, August 2nd, and I'm Mark Ross, retired partner of PwC, and honored to be starting my tenure as the president of the City Club Board of Directors. Those that know me know I am a political junkie, and subsequent to my retirement from the firm, there are days when I wake up and am glued to cable news for hours. So in late June, I thought, well, a little separation might be in order. So I left the country to unplug for about 2.5 weeks in Europe, assuming I wouldn't miss much. Yeah, bad assumption. I missed the Biden debate performance, all the drama that followed that. Also missed the attempted assassination on former President Trump. I got home just in time for the Republicans' choice of J.D. Vance and the drama that followed that, and then the complete reboot by the Democrats with the shift to President Harris. While I am a political junkie, I am not an expert, but my gut does say there hasn't been this much craziness since 1968, or at a minimum, the hanging chads of Bush versus Gore in 2000. So yeah, I am beyond excited to be here for this discussion today where with these important voices, we're going to help demystify where we're at and where we're going. Joining us on stage is Matt Cox, founder and president at Capital Partners, Henry Gomez, senior national political reporter at NBC News Digital, Quentin James, founder and president of the Collective PAC, and moderating today's discussion is Jenny Hamill, voice of Sound of Ideas at IdeaStream Public Radio. If you have questions for our speakers, you can text it to 330-541-5794. That's 330-541-5794. And the City Club staff will try to work it into the second half of our program. Members and friends of the City Club of Cleveland, please join me in welcoming our guests. Jenny, over to you.
All right, let's have a great conversation. Let's talk about how Vice President Kamala Harris has changed the dynamics of the race. I was reading this morning that there are now more than a handful of polls that put her at a slight lead and even leading in a couple of crucial swing states. Henry, I want to give you an opportunity to give us your perspective on the state of the race.
So it's a great question to start out with. I mean, going back 3-4 weeks ago, right after that debate between Biden and Trump, right after the debate is when Democrats started panicking, obviously. They saw what was already going to be a close race slipping away from them. And on the other side, and my reporting and reporting that my colleagues have done, we started seeing the Trump side getting very confident in their chances, thinking, this is a landslide, both popular vote and electoral college. This is a landslide. They were going into their convention feeling very confident, and then of course the night before the Republican convention, well, the night before I left for the Republican convention, there was the assassination attempt. So it's just, things just keep changing so much. But even after that, they started feeling like this is our chance the Republicans started feeling like this is our chance to show unity, show some grace. That's what the convention ostensibly was about for the Republicans. And they mostly kept to that script of unity. Trump, of course, picks J.D. Vance, and then right out of that convention, you've got Biden dropping out, and it just changes everything. You've got the old quotes from Senator Vance coming back into play. You've got a new energy at the top of the Democratic ticket that wasn't there before. To the point where we're hearing from our sources in the Democratic Party, why didn't they do this months ago? Because the way things were going with Biden, it's just like, at best, this is going to be a very, very close race until the end. But there wasn't a whole lot of, I mostly cover the Republican side, but I still do have a lot of sources on the Democratic side. And it was very workmanlike in a way that didn't have a lot of joy or a lot of passion. It was just like, yep, we're doing this again. And for better or for worse, we're doing this again with these two guys. It was all about democracy and saving democracy. And that was like the central argument for Biden's reelection, was saving democracy. But now it's a bunch of different things. There's this new energy with Harris atop the ticket. They're still talking about saving democracy, but they're talking about so many other things. The historic nature of her, soon-to-be official nomination, bringing people back into the party, bringing new people into the party. And so really it's been an abrupt shift in terms of who is feeling confident heading toward the DNC and heading toward Election Day.
So Quentin, just how confident do you think the Democrats at the top and nationwide feel right now?
So first, it's great to be here. Thank you all for having me. I would use the words of the vice president. She is an underdog right now. I think the polls are tight. She's running a little ahead of where Biden was, but she's in no way the front runner in this race right now. And so I just want to pause any kind of overconfidence from anyone. There's momentum. There is history, history-breaking fundraising. This morning they announced that Vice President Harris raised $310 million in July, with over $377 million on hand. We've never seen that kind of organization, this close to an election. Now, is, the clock a challenge, right? Can you organize a national campaign in 95 days? We're gonna see. But she is an underdog right now with momentum. I think polls are changing, but a lot of work has to be done to ensure her victory.
And there are some pundits that say in order for her to win, she really has to recreate the Obama coalition of voters. Strategy-wise, they're saying she needs to galvanize those young voters, voters of color. Do you think that is happening?
So I would disagree a little bit.
Okay.
I think we're going to see a Kamala Harris coalition.
Okay.
One that is not Obama, one that's not Joe Biden. What I mean by that is Kamala Harris is not doing great with white voters right now, particularly older white voters. She's doing tremendously well with young people, with women, with people of color. But this will be a new coalition, similar to Obama, but Obama did really good with white voters in a way that people didn't expect. I think if you look at Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, their strengths and weaknesses are kind of like flip-flopped. Joe Biden was polling really badly with people of color, with young people. She's doing really great there. And so we're going to see a new coalition be created. And I'm interested to see how these states align. I believe that her path has to run through Pennsylvania. And so, again, not breaking any news, but I would be surprised if her VP pick is not Governor Shapiro, because she does really not have a huge path outside of Pennsylvania. But if you think about the four fastest growing states in America, the four most fastest growing states in terms of diversity, where are they? They're Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, right? States that, sure, maybe Biden and Obama won, but I think the numbers will look a little bit different in terms of her coalition.
All right, so Matt, to be clear, you are a Republican.
Clearly.
But not a Trump supporter.
Correct. Yes.
But I think you see clearly what their appeal is, what the campaign is run on, and what the messaging is. So how do you think the Trump-Vance campaign is rejiggering their messaging and their focus with Harris as the presumptive nominee?
Well, historically, voters vote with their guts and not their brains. If you think about they do. I mean, you have to arouse an emotion in someone to get them to want to go out and vote. And Trump was hitting on all those cylinders in opposition to Biden, who, when you think about, people have to think about the fact that Joe Biden's been a good president. He might be able to, and once you kind of get into that third or fourth convincing of someone, they're just not going to get up and go vote. And that was the biggest problem that Biden faced, and it was made very clear with his debate performance, where a lot of people look at Trump and they think, I don't like that guy, and they look at Biden and they think, oh my God, what is he doing? And so what Harris has done is she's been able to kind of get not the Obama coalition, but the Obama emotional feeling behind the presidency. And Trump didn't expect that. I think they figured it was over after the Biden debate performance. No more evidence of the fact that Trump didn't say much during the time after that. And so when your opponent's hanging themselves, you try not to get involved and you let them hang themselves. And Trump was showing some pretty good restraint then. And then, I think Fortunately for the Democratic ticket, they were able to convince Biden to step aside. And I don't think Trump's ready for what that message is against her. I think they're going with the same old race issues, scaring voters about immigration, the economy, dangerous liberal. But it's going to be a while until that lands, if at all.
Yeah, Henry, are you getting a read on how they are changing or at least attempting to mold some sort of messaging against Kamala Harris is working or not?
Yes, I mean, first of all, the Republicans will say that they anticipated this outcome all along, that they thought that there was a scenario in which Kamala Harris would be at the top of the ticket. And in fact, if you go back to last summer at this time, anywhere you went on the Republican primary circuit, you'd have Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis saying that it was going to be Kamala Harris or Michelle Obama was going to be the Democratic nominee. But then, after that disastrous debate performance for Biden, you had them saying, no, Biden's going to be the nominee, Biden should stay, because it was, it became more of a wishful thinking. They saw a very weakened candidate that could be easily beaten. However, behind the scenes, they were preparing for Harris, and they were preparing for Harris Shapiro, which is one of the reasons why they picked J.D. Vance to be Trump's running mate. They thought that Vance might be able to offset what Shapiro brings in Philadelphia and the collar counties around Philadelphia by camping out in western Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Erie, Johnstown, places like that. But they didn't really think it out in terms of theory, or at least it doesn't seem like they did, because as Matt just mentioned, the messaging has been a bit of a challenge and a bit of a muddle for them. The first week of Vance's rollout was, hit or miss, and I think a lot of people would argue it was miss because he spent most of the time defending himself against comments he made years previously. But what started to get to, and I'm going to answer your question right now, but this week starts with the Republicans trying to reboot a little bit after the bumpy Vance rollout, and they decide that Vance is going to be the guy that takes the policy attack to Kamala Harris. He's going to hit her really hard on immigration, on border security, which was the subtext of this trip that Vance did out west this week that ended yesterday at the U.S.-Mexico border in Arizona.
And to let the audience know, you were actually there on the campaign trail with
I was there. I bailed out before they went down to the border. And they were going to brand her as an ultra-liberal, weak leader responsible for all the failures of the Biden administration. They were going to try to tag her with the move she made to the left when she was running for president in 2019. They were going to do all those things, and they started to do all those things. And then Wednesday happened, and I'm sure you saw. Trump was at the NABJ event where he questioned Kamala Harris's racial identity, questioned whether she was, she turned black, as if she put it on.
Years ago, she was Indian, and then she turned black.
Like she bought a new pair of jeans or something like that. And I was with Vance on the trail at the time, and they had to respond to it. I mean, he was giving basically the same speech everywhere he went, and then that afternoon, he had to insert language about this, where he kind of, did not go as far as incendiary as Trump did at the NABJ event, but kind of said, "Oh, he still calls him the president. The president has a point. She's a chameleon. She changes her positions all the time, and
So again, I mean,
back to me.
Does that work?
Well, again, look, I firmly believe that these elections are about white suburban women and turnout amongst everyone else in this room. And when women are scared, they vote Republican. When they're disgusted, they vote Democrat. And so the goal, and we've all seen this, I mean, my first election was Willie Horton. The goal is to make the women scared. And then they vote Republican. So what the Trump campaign has to try and do, through all of the words that they're using, is to try and put some fear into the minds of suburban women. And then, the Democrats have to try and beat that back because it's just so wrong and stupid. But otherwise, that's kind of what's at play now. So they need to find a message that's not just that, because I think if they overplay it, then there's a danger there. But thus far, in the history of time since the 60s, that's tended to work.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of women, you see this huge galvanization of women. I mean, after Harris was named, there was some, 50,000 women on a Zoom call, 50,000 black women, and then I heard another 200,000 just women in general. So there really seems to be an excitement about a woman candidate. But I guess the question is, and Quentin, I'll have you take a stab at it, but is the country ready for a Black and Indian biracial female president?
The answer is yes, but I would remind us to really pause and think about Donald Trump. He got to prominence by questioning Barack Obama's birth certificate. And for the first time, I think we are seeing Trump get back down to a corner. And so he's reverting to his strength. Let's question the identity of this person, right? It's really the origin of white supremacy in this country. And it wasn't on accident, it was really intentional. And so this conversation around fear is actually a very important campaign strategy that we all need to be aware of. If you agree with it, right, you'll probably vote for Trump. If you don't, then obviously you're gonna support Vice President Harris. But it's not Trump being crazy. It is actually, I think, the basis of really the only real negative they can maybe create around Vice President Harris is who is she? Can we trust this person? Which gets to your question of, is America ready for this woman? Is America ready for a person of color to lead again? So my answer to your question is yes. I think the momentum, the grassroots energy we're seeing is there. The Win What Black Women call, over 44,000 Black women raised over $3 million in 24 hours for her. That next day, I helped organize the Black Men for Harris call. We had over 54,000 Black men raise $1.5 million in 24 hours. We've never seen that type of organic organizing before for anybody. And if we're being honest and transparent, I think the energy around her is very different than Obama. I think her bio actually answers a lot of these questions around what our country wants and where our country's gonna head in the future. So you talk about women. I think women will be the most important demographic group in this election.
Sorry. It gets to the miscalculation of Kamala because the Republicans assumed she was so weak that they didn't have to really prepare for her. That would have been, in a way, some people were thinking a gift. But what she's done in 2 weeks, I mean, first of all, locking down the nomination, which she didn't know Biden was doing what he did until an hour before.
Exactly.
And by the end of that night, she had 300 endorsements and it was basically over. And then
And I think there was an anticipation of, is the DNC going to be an open contest?
Right.
Who's going to throw their ring in the hat? But that seemed consolidated, that support behind Kamala pretty quickly.
Yeah, and $400 million from, 3 million unique donors? Something like that?
Exactly.
I mean, that's a political machine that no one saw coming.
Well, we kind of did see it coming, right? I mean, we've seen...
I'll talk from the Republican side.
Yes, that's fair. I mean, right here in Ohio, right? With the ballot initiative last year, we saw the energy and all the organization that was happening around women in this country. And so I really want people to understand, yes, young people will be important. Yes, Black voters will be important. But women, this is really, I think, a huge moment. Going back to the Women's March that I think we're going to see culminate in November with this election.
So Henry, being a man of Ohio and having a knowledge of Ohio politics, this state went for Trump by 8 points last election, went for Obama previously, but I think there are many who think it's solidly red at this point. Do you think there's any chance that Ohio would go Democratic in November?
I mean, I don't want to make any predictions. I made that mistake in 2016 as well as a lot of other people. And then I got fooled in 2020 in the month before when, Democrats like Sherrod Brown and David Pepper, the state party chair at the time, were begging national Democrats to spend more money here because they thought that Biden was within a point or two of winning and ended up losing by the same 8-point margin that Hillary Clinton lost Ohio by 4 years before that. So I'm going to root my answer in data, and you start the over-under at 8 points, I think, for a Trump victory in Ohio. And the only question to me before Biden dropped out was whether, it stayed around 8 points or whether Trump won by 10. I do think there's some room for Kamala Harris to improve on those margins, especially if, turnout in the 3 Cs is higher. There was slippage in those areas and when Clinton and Biden were on the ballot. Obama did very, very well. Obama won Ohio twice, and he did it by building a big coalition that not only included, Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, but doing well in suburban areas. So I think it's a very, very big reach for Democrats. I don't think National Democrats will spend money here, at least not in the presidential race. I think you'll see a lot of national money coming in here to prop up Sherrod Brown, who's in a really, to me, that's the better question. Does Sherrod Brown have a shot? And of course he does. There's only one Democrat that could win that Senate seat, and it's Sherrod Brown. And it's why he's running again, because he's in his 70s. He's had a long career. I have no doubt that he thought long and hard about hanging it up, but he knows he's the only Democrat that can win that seat. And so the question is, like, if Trump is winning Ohio between 6 and 10 points, which I think at the moment is not an unrealistic range to put it in, can Sherrod Brown outsurf that enough to beat Bernie Moreno? And I'd be curious for what these two do.
Yeah, I would say that Sherrod Brown is propping up Democrats. It's not the other way around in Ohio. Let's be clear on that. So I do think Sherrod Brown does win. He's up by 4 or 5 points, whatever poll you kind of follow. He's never been down to Bernie Moreno, so I think he's in a good shape. Right now, I think Kamala Harris is down by at least 10 in Ohio, partly because of the demographics. She's not doing great with white voters. But also, for those in the room who are doing voter engagement, there are estimated over 500,000 unregistered black voters in Ohio. Another 275,000 who are registered who didn't vote in 2020 or in 2022. So if you're winning a state by 400,000 votes, you have over 750,000 black people who are not registered or voting, then I think you're down by 10 points, right? Now, can we close those gaps? Possibly. In one cycle, I don't know. But I think Sherrod Brown wins. I think these House races will be really important. Because again, the history-making moment of Kamala Harris is important, but also, if Democrats win the House, Hakeem Jeffries becomes the first black speaker of the House as well. That has to happen by winning and keeping some of these House seats in Ohio. Amelia Sykes over in Akron, the Democrats down in Southern Ohio. And so there will be national money here in Ohio, House and Senate. I don't think presidential, to your point.
All right, so then Matt, why don't you tell us what you think are the states that really it's going to come down to in November, the swing states that we keep talking about. What is the path to the presidency?
The same as it's been. I mean, we've kind of mentioned them already. There's the traditional blue wall of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, used to be Ohio. And then there's the southern states that were mentioned earlier, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia. Keep reaching for that North Carolina ring.
We're going to keep reaching.
Happened once. But that's in play. And, when I was growing up, Virginia was always Republican. And now it's pretty consistently Democrat. So these things are changing in the South. But that's where turnout amongst minorities and young voters are higher, or in the southern states, particularly Georgia, which led to having 2 Democrat senators in Georgia, which is just, if you think about that, it's mind-blowing. Versus minority and youth turnout in Ohio, which was already mentioned. I mean, 14% in some areas of the east side of Cleveland. I don't know how any Democrat overcomes that. Sherrod will, I believe, to agree with the others on this panel, because there's a historical emotion about him, because he was against NAFTA, he's for the working man. I mean, all those things kind of are like, yeah, I like Sherrod. He's kind of a, Democrat Trump in a way, without all the bluster and the name calling. But it's pretty simple math at that point.
Okay, so let's talk about Kamala Harris's potential vice presidential pick. It's expected that she might make an announcement in the coming days, and she has met with some of the top contenders. So I'd love to hear from all of you. And there's this focus on how she needs to balance the ticket in order to get those votes in those key swing states and to get the election. So I'd love to hear from you. Some guesses on who that running mate might be.
You're the political expert.
Well, so, our reporting at NBC, and it's been, matched by some other news outlets. It does seem to be focused on 4 to 6 Democrats. Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, as Quentin mentioned. Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona.
Bashir?
Bashir, yes, Bashir from Kentucky. Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, and I'm missing one. I think we had 6 on our graphic.
Whitmer?
Cooper's out, yeah.
that?
Cooper, but he's
Cooper.
out.
Cooper took himself out. I mean, a lot of our reporting has focused a lot on Shapiro and what he brings to the ticket, being from Pennsylvania, being more of a tonal moderate who can help sort of bridge some gaps, perhaps in the party. But really, for Shapiro, it's about geography. There's been a lot of buzz about Waltz because no one knew who he was 2 weeks ago, at least nationally. I knew who he was because I've interviewed him before, but he kind of jumped out. He did a lot of TV appearances. He talks. He's presented himself as somebody who's eager to take on a guy like J.D. Vance. I know that Quentin and I were talking backstage, so he has some thoughts on this too. But I mean, I'm not going to put any bets on anything, but I do think there's white hot speculation around Josh Shapiro, and it's for a very good reason.
Quentin?
Yeah, so someone who told me that Joe Biden was going to drop out of the race and announce Sunday after church, I didn't believe them. So they also just told me that we're going to hear about the vice president probably on Sunday. So don't hold me to it, but
Okay.
Just
Inside
sold my
scoop,
scoop. You just sold my
everyone.
scoop.
We'll see. I mean, we're going to know on Tuesday. It's just 48 hours early. They're going to be together on the road. So yeah, again, I think it's going to be Governor Shapiro. I just don't see a path without winning Pennsylvania. He's very popular in Pennsylvania. He's going to, hopefully deliver that state for her. Now, there's a lot of controversy surrounding him as well online. Things around his staff sexual harassment and his comments to students who are protesting against Gaza and the war in Israel. So I don't know for sure. I just don't see a electoral path without the state of Pennsylvania, and he would deliver that. I think Governor Waltz can do that. I think Secretary Buttigieg can do that as well. But if I had to put money on it, it would be Governor Shapiro.
Yeah, one thing, I listened to a daily podcast recently, and a lot of the potential vice president picks are great on stage, and they're great at the microphone. And the way they talk about Vance or Trump, it seems like it would be an exciting final couple of months.
Can I just also say, I don't mean to spread rumors, but I'm hearing this from reliable people in the party. We're hearing that Trump is doing polling on replacing J.D. Vance as a vice presidential candidate with Nikki Haley. And so I don't know if that's a real thing, but I'm putting it out there that I think the J.D. Vance issue is a real polling issue that they're finding. And so if you see that or hear rumors about that, don't be surprised.
Quentin told you first.
I'm just saying.
All right, so Matt, let's talk about it. I mean, the rollout's been rough.
Yep.
The childless cat ladies and
Yep.
what is it, the proportional voting comment.
Women, tax on women.
Do you
Yeah,
think?
all great Republican principles. Yeah, I love the stories. Every person knows someone. Mark Kelly canceled all of his weekend events. And they're all speculating about that. That's always fun. And then there was this article that was really good about how, in a traditional setting, you would think about the fact that you don't want your running mate, when you have all year, you don't want your running mate to speak better than you, or look better than you, or be that much taller than you, or all those different optics things. Whereas now, with 2.5 months left, it's well, how do we win? Mm-hmm. I'm not privy to the Donald Trump world, obviously, but they don't let me in. But I've not heard any of that about polling his running mate. I think J.D. Vance will settle down and things will be fine. It's not Sarah Palin, that's for sure.
Correct.
But it was a rough start. A lot of people, and in my circle, which is very specific, as you can imagine, a lot of people were like, "What was he saying?"
Right.
And these are traditional Trump-supporting Republicans, and they just were like, "Whoa, that was," because all their wives are now angry at them for this comment. And so I don't think Vance gets replaced. I don't think it's going to be Shapiro. I think it'll be Mark Kelly.
I mean, he was a law enforcement officer, astronaut.
Astronaut from Arizona. They can argue immigration. He was tough on immigration.
Yep.
All that stuff kind of feeds in. You got to, like I said earlier, you got to tick away the fears. So if they can take away immigration as a fear, because I always like to play this game. Have you met an immigrant? You probably haven't. Yet you're probably afraid of them because because of what's being trumped up on TV. And that starts to take away those fears on that one very specific issue, and I think that's what does it.
So this is going to be my last question before we open it up to audience Q&A, and I hope a lot of you have questions for our panelists. But Henry, as far as the issues that are being talked about on the campaign trail, I mean, is it all about the economy, immigration, how we perform in the international theater?
I mean, the first two definitely are the ones that I'm hearing most about when I'm out there with candidates, when I'm out there talking to voters, or at different campaign rallies or events. It does skew a little differently if you're at a Democratic event versus a Republican event. If you're at a Republican event, you're hearing a ton about immigration, the border, fentanyl coming in. And I don't think that those are issues actually that are like isolated to either party. It's just how the parties talk about them, right? I don't think anybody is. I don't think Democrats are opposed to border security. They want the country. Everybody wants the country to be safe, but it's the way that Republicans have been messaging on this issue for the last 8 to 12 years has really become pronounced around the danger of not just the drugs that are coming, but the people themselves that are coming. I mean, you hear a lot about the economy. I hear a ton about inflation. I hear from voters who are like, the people reporting the news and the people making the news don't feel the same pinch that I do when I'm at the store and I'm paying double for certain products, double what I was paying a few years ago. And that's something that hits everybody, and that's something I think both parties do message on and care about, talk about it in different ways. They blame different people for it. It's a very complex thing, too complex for 30-second political ads and campaign rallies. But I would say that, inflation or the perceptions around inflation are what really are driving a lot of the emotion right now among the voting population.
Matt, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think those issues are front of mind. I think the cost one is probably most specific, especially at the grocery store. I think like gas prices, that's a political game. I think people realize gas prices go up and down based on other factors. At least I hope they do. But they don't understand why their milk costs twice as much as it did 2 years ago, or their eggs, or the sandwich at McDonald's, or whatever the $5 meal is that people are trying to get. And so that's going to be a huge issue. But what Kamala provides is a break from that. And this is why they waited. And I think this was a bit more planned than people think. They wanted to do it after the convention so they can have a fresh start and kind of cut off all of the positive going to Trump. And Kamala now has the ability to say, well, yeah, but I wasn't president, when this happened. So that's, I think, why they did it when they did it. The calls for her to actually become president are insane. There's no way that's going to happen, because then she gets bogged down with the same issues. So I think there's a chance to reset the table on those things. It's just a matter of if they even have to, but if they can get it done in the next couple weeks.
I think you're giving Democrats too much credit there with this planning.
I would
Clifton was with me. We hosted President Biden's last campaign event in Las Vegas. We didn't know at the time it was going to be his last campaign event, but he was still running before that Sunday. Changed everything. Look, I will say the amazing thing right now is that Kamala Harris's bio actually answers the hits against her really well, right? And I think the facts do as well, too. Crime is down right now. Crime was up under Donald Trump. Border crossings are down. Border crossings were up under Donald Trump. We can kind of go issue by issue and talk about the successes of the Biden-Harris administration. Now, will we have time to communicate that and convince enough people? I don't know. My opinion, Quentin James, not the City Club, is that if Fox News is going to lie to millions of people every day, like, how do you counter that? We saw the lawsuit from 2020. Will there be another one? I don't know. But this kind of suggestion that you have to be afraid of your neighbor, you have to be afraid of immigrants, I think is very dangerous. And I think people are going to see through that. To your point, I think our communities are becoming more diverse, more inclusive. And I think it's going to be a real opportunity for Americans to really tell some honest truths about our communities. I think it's like the comment last week is going to backfire, the comment about identity, right? America's always required anyone who had a drop of black blood in them to be considered black. That's an American principle, right? And so now challenge that and question that, I think is really interesting. And so you're going to see, I think, over the next few weeks, moments of Americans coming together to refute the negativity, the fear-mongering, and just tell the truth. There was a border bill that was bipartisan that Democrats got hit on from many folks in the immigration community, but the Republicans and Donald Trump stopped that bill, right? And so as many more Americans hear, I think, the truth, maybe it breaks through. I just don't know if we can defeat the media machine on the right and the TikTok conspiracy theorists and all those folks who are really have a hold on a lot of people right now. So that's what I'm concerned about moving forward.
All right, we are about to begin the audience Q&A. For our live stream and radio audience, or those just joining, I'm Jenny Hamill, host of The Sound of Ideas at IdeaStream Public Media, and the moderator for today's conversation. Today, we are discussing the presidential election and the newly remade landscape of it. Joining me on stage is Matt Cox, founder and president at Capital Partners, Henry Gomez, senior national political reporter at NBC News Digital, and Quentin James, founder and president at The Collective PAC. We welcome questions from everyone here today, City Club members, guests, and those joining us via live stream at cityclub.org or radio at 89.7 WKSU, IdeaStream Public Media. If you'd like to text a question for our speakers, you can text it to 330-541-5794. Again, 330-541-5794. And City Club staff will try to work it into the program. So may we have the first question, please?
Sure. We're going to start with one of the many text questions we are receiving. So, if Trump does lose in a big way, what happens to the Republican Party? And does MAGA fever break, or do we just move on to MAGA 2 with a similar Trump-like candidate?
That's a question.
Oh, do I have
for
to answer
Matt.
that one?
Yeah, sure. You're our guy for that.
I think the hope is the MAGA fever breaks. I think when you look at every other candidate that's tried to become Trump, some even in the state, they fail at it because they become a caricature of someone that no one really likes to begin with. But I've been hoping that for a long time, and it hasn't happened. So I thought it would happen this cycle. I thought Nikki Haley would be able to beat Trump. But you know, it'll take time, and it's going to have to be some kind of shift back towards, you know, the Republican Party that is a traditional working, functioning party, and it currently, right now, isn't.
I mean, I would just say, as somebody who on January 6, 2021, talked to a bunch of Republicans who said Trump was finished in the party, and, you know, they were, as horrible as that day was to these Republicans I talked to, they felt almost a sense of relief because they felt that it meant that there was no way Trump could go forward as leader of the party after his supporters, you know, stormed the Capitol and threatened to hang the Republican vice president of the United States. Well, look where we're at. He won the Republican nomination 4 years later without breaking a sweat. He didn't even campaign last summer when Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley won it in a walk. So if he loses this November, there's nothing that says he can't run again in 4 years. And by picking a J.D. Vance as your running mate, somebody who is loyal to you and who is being seen as MAGA 2, who has the support of Donald Trump Jr., the former president's eldest son, who is also seen as, you know, the tip of the spear of MAGA 2. I'm very skeptical. Sorry, Matt, that MAGA and Trumpism is going away anytime soon.
My only comments would be, if he loses, does he lose? And I think we aren't. No, I mean literally.
Trump would love to hear you say
No. I don't. What I mean is, there are over 70 election deniers who are over county election offices in swing states, and so if you think the votes are what matters on election day, you are wrong. It is certifying the actual elections. Okay, and it's not even about Cuyahoga County, right? If one of the smaller counties in Ohio says we're not going to certify the election, what happens, right? Is there a process to which our systems, with MAGA on the Supreme Court, right? If MAGA wins the House, right, we're going to be in much bigger danger here. And so this isn't about November 5th. This is about what happens between then and January 6th when the election gets certified. And so I don't mean to cause fear or panic, but if I was you, I would sign up to be a poll worker. I would take off that day and work on this process because they are planning contingencies depending on what happens with the vote. And that's what I'm worried about, actually.
In defense of my Republican friends, the Supreme Court didn't take up any of the voting irregularity claims that Rudy Giuliani or Trump was making all across the country. There is a court system. If a county elections person decided not to certify the vote, in Ohio it would be 2-2, obviously. So that would go to the Secretary of State, which would then go to a court, and that would never get to the Supreme Court. At least the evidence showed that during the 2020 election, they chose not to take any of those cases, not even listen to them. So I have a little bit of hope that our system survives. Party may not. System survives.
My question is not the most profound, but I truly want to hear an answer from each of you. When I hear people question Harris's qualifications, yet they voted for a reality star with nowhere near the same bio, it kind of tells me that issues, qualifications may not be the most important thing to people as they vote. So my question is, childless Catwoman, how much is that going to play a part in the actual voting?
When you hear people questioning qualifications, when in polling, the two questions that we ask people to figure out what they mean by that. Number one, do we share the same values? Right? That's the question around bios. Like, it's not, are you black? Do we have the same values? And second, do you care about people like me, my community, my neighborhood, my family even? And so that is going to be the question that will have a lot to do with how people vote. Do they see they share the same values with Trump versus Kamala? Or do they see that Kamala or Trump cares about people like them more? And that will determine how they vote, which is what I think Matt was saying around the gut, right? That's the gut question.
Yeah. Well, and I know a lot of Trump voters, I'm not one of them, never was one, will not be, just to make that clear with everyone. Trump won because there's a group of people in this country who think that it's either a joke, government, or they've forgotten them. Mm-hmm. Those are the two main pillars of the Trump voter. Now, there's a lot of racism in there. There's a lot of other stuff, but that's it. So they figure, screw it, I'll vote for Donald Trump. I don't care what he says or does. That's my way of sticking it to the man because no one's been, giving me anything. And that's why he won, not because he's a celebrity. I mean, that gave him wattage to say what he said, but ultimately that was the feeling behind Trump winning in 16.
He's their referendum vote.
Yeah, right. And, we've had 4 years of normal government, kind of, and I fear people have forgotten what that 4 years was like under Trump, so they're like, well, let's try it again, maybe. That's the danger in my mind.
I mean, I think that to your question about qualifications, we've seen, and Matt touched on this a bit, that they matter less than they used to, or at least they seem to have in national elections. You've got, and I do think him being a reality TV star actually did help him win, because when I would talk to voters that year, and I'd be like, you've got this guy who was hosting The Apprentice, has been filed for bankruptcy how many times as a businessman, running against, a woman who has been Secretary of State, has been a senator, led key policy initiatives in the White House as First Lady. On paper, leaps and bounds more qualified politically, governmentally than Donald Trump. Why are you voting for Donald Trump? And he's been in our living room for the last 15 years. We love what he has to say. We have to shake up the system. And it gets to a little bit of what you did say, and that's that, they thought he was this agent from outside the system brought in to shake it up. I mean, now look who his running mate is this time. Somebody who has less experience in the Senate than Kamala Harris did when she was selected to be Joe Biden's running mate. He was a guy who, before he was elected to the Senate, was best known for writing, a book of the month type book that was, very critically praised, had a Netflix movie adapted from it, had been in venture capital, graduated from law school 12 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. So this, somebody that has very little experience as well, and these are things that they see the Republicans are pushing as selling points, whereas, you can look at Kamala Harris's resume in comparison to J.D. Vance's, and not only was she a senator for I think 4 years when she was picked, she's now been vice president for 4 years or 3.5 years. She was an attorney general and a prosecutor before. They're trying to pick apart the years that she was, a prosecutor as well. But I don't know. I mean, I think that the way that Cat Ladies plays into all that is, yes, both these campaigns are trying to define each other. And even though J.D. Vance hasn't made the childless cat ladies comment since 2021, like it'll endure of his vision of people like Kamala Harris and other Democrats. And I'm sure you'll see the Democrats remind voters that that's what he thought of them when he talked about them in 2021.
Thank you all for the fascinating discussion. Earlier this week, I read in the Journal that in a collection of their polls, they had young men specifically under 30 sizably changed since 4 years ago, and now under a Trump versus Biden-Harris ticket, the young men are plus 15 for Trump compared to plus 30 for women in a Biden-Harris ticket. So on the Trump side, what can the Republican Party do to realize these polling gains? Or on the Harris side, what can they do to not realize the data that appears to be shown in the polling?
Did you say you read the newspaper?
Yeah.
The Journal.
On TikTok?
Got to capture that guy and put him.
Yeah.
Polls happen all the time. These numbers change. It was probably a sample size of 400 to 600 tops in any one state. I don't put too much weight into that. I kind of look at the long term, and so if Republicans want to start going after the young voter, they can stop talking and start realizing that young voters care about an entirely different set of things than a 78-year-old white man cares about. Voters in rural Ohio care a lot different than they do sitting in this room. And this is why we've gotten so tribal, which is the problem. When you're only focused on the people who you either represent or just your kind of base, you're forgetting everyone else, and at some point that's going to hurt you. And I think that's what the Trump campaign is experiencing right now.
I mean, I think that to go back to an earlier point that was made a question about like MAGA and MAGA 2. I mean, I don't know that I agree with Matt about polling, being kind of a fluid thing here, but like if you look at who the Republican Party is elevating as sort of their like next generation of voices, it's young white men. Donald Trump Jr., J.D. Vance, Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA, Ben Shapiro. These are all young, very right-wing male voices that are dominating podcast charts, have a huge following among young men, talk about issues that are seen as threats to young white men.
And what are some of them? I'm curious.
I mean,
Rogan, Barstool Sports.
Go ahead.
No, I'm saying like you can add in there a Joe Rogan podcast.
Joe
Barstool
Rogan,
Sports.
yeah,
I mean, these are all.
absolutely.
It's
Jack
all,
Posobiec. I mean, like all these.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's just I mean, I don't want to get down into the underbelly here, but it's I think the stuff that J.D. Vance has talked about, and what I'm sure, I think he tries to come at it from maybe a more intellectual standpoint, and you can disagree with my use of that word, I suppose, but like it's stuff like these debates over whether women that don't have children are what their societal value. I think there's a lot of stuff like that that's out there in that ecosystem, and it's these younger male right-wing leaders and figures who are giving voice to that, and I do think that that's seeping into the polling that you're seeing.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a fascinating question. I think it's one that we don't take seriously enough in this country. And I want to single in on like young white men who we just don't talk about enough, whether it be issues of suicide. I mean, we saw the young gentleman who was bullied, who tried to assassinate the president. Like, it's a real challenge. I think it's beyond party. I think it's actually like a lot we got to do around mental health and just being seen, to your point. When people feel like, and again, I'm not here to mansplain, but there is some legitimacy to issues around like everything masculine is not toxic, right? Like some people don't want to mention their pronouns when they come in a room. That's not to be anti, it's just to say, how do we make space for that? And I think a criticism I would give to Democrats is that we may be trying to move the country too fast and not bring people along. And you got to meet together in spaces to connect to actually make that progress. Versus saying we're going to just pass a bathroom bill or whatever it is, right? I think it's moving too fast for a lot of young men who may feel forgotten or not seen right now. And it's having dire issues in our community. So yes, I don't think the numbers are exactly right, but I do think the trend line is right in that we got to do more to win men in general, but also young men.
When Biden was the candidate, polls were showing that Trump had increased support among working class, Latino, and Black men. How does Harris's candidacy change that dynamic, if at all? Thank you.
It's already gotten into his head, as we saw at the NABJ event the other day, where he's. I mean, and then that wasn't a one-off. The next day on his social media platform, he posted a photo of Harris and her relatives, and talked about how she's Indian American. They're trying to say she's not Black now. So I think that's shaken up the race. It's gotten into his head a little bit. It's changed. He's become more reactionary to the ticket. Where he was playing offense for months on Biden. Even though they're 3 or 4 years apart in age, Biden clearly looked, sounded, acted like a much older man than Donald Trump did. I think that is indisputable if you're watching television. We don't know what he looks like every day at the White House. He just negotiated a very major prisoner release, so he's obviously on the job. But he was on defense for months against Trump, and now the tables have turned a bit, and he's trying to find his footing. So I think that's just anecdotally one way it's changed.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot from the vice president's campaign around her engagement, connecting the issues to men in general. She just has to tell that story. I think for a lot of Black men want to hear her story as it relates to Black men, because there's a narrative that she imprisoned a lot of Black men. We know that to be factually inaccurate, but she has to tell that story. We can't just talk about facts and studies and reports. She's going to have to do that work. Do I think she will be successful in that? I do. But I think it's also been like 10 days, 11 days since she's been a candidate. And so we got to give her some space and time to do it. But I do think, listen, the number one target for misinformation online are Black men. They consume more media online and they share more media online. And so part of the strategy of NABJ wasn't Trump being Trump. This was a intentional hit talking to not just conservative whites, but to Black men as well. Is she really Black? She really care about you? Because I do, right? So that was a part of his strategy.
Right.
I think we got to counter that, and we're going to see that from the campaign over the next few days and weeks.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question.
77,000 votes in 3 Midwestern states determined the 2016 election: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Clearly, it's a very few people that would decide this election. They call them swing voters, they call them independents. I know we're having big, broad national discussions about things, but ultimately it's coming down to a very few people on some vital issues. So who are those very few people? Naturally, Midwest decided in 2016. Who are those few people? They say the swing states now are Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Georgia. So who are they and what are those issues? Thank you.
And someone gets less than a minute to respond. We've kind of gone over it, but Henry, I'm going to let you summarize it in 45 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down still to the blue wall states of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, because those are where the margins were the thinnest. I do think that Kamala being atop the ticket does put Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina back in play a little bit more than maybe they would have been if Biden was at the top of the ticket. I think that they were going to, I think the Democrats were really writing off Nevada until that point. But I do think it comes down to those 3 Midwest or industrial states. I think that means it comes down to issues like the economy, inflation and economic policy. Sorry, I'm just rushing because I only got 45 seconds.
Sorry.
Yes, I'm picking those. I'm asserting my Midwest superiority with my answer.
I'm going to say white women.
Okay. I want to thank Matt Cox,
Yep.
Henry Gomez, and Quentin James for joining us at the City Club today for a great conversation. Thank you so much. Forums like this are made possible thanks to generous support from individuals like you. You can learn more about how to become a guardian of free speech at cityclub.org. We'd also like to welcome guests at tables hosted by Capital Partners, Cleveland Votes, IdeaStream Public Media, Vote to Live Action Fund, and the Young Latino Network. Up next at the City Club on Friday, August 9th, we are joined by Jeff Opperman, Global Freshwater Lead Scientist at the World Wildlife Fund. For the 2024 State of the Great Lakes, he'll discuss the values of freshwater systems to people, cities, and economies, and what the world can learn from our Great Lakes. Then on Friday, August 16th, the City Club will welcome Catherine Lehman, Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education. She is going to discuss protecting civil rights in K-12 and higher education, including the record number of civil rights complaints filed in part due to rising partisan tensions, LGBTQ+ rights, and the Israel-Hamas war. You can learn more about these upcoming forums and others at cityclub.org. And that brings us to the end of today's forum. Thank you once again to all of our speakers, to our members, and our friends here at the City Club. I'm Jenny Hamill, and this forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.